Hey, hi everyone. So this is the Law Club Africa Fireside Chat, and today on this edition we have Aaron Fo, who is going to be here, and I'm going to be asking him questions. He's the head of growth at Catalyst Fund BFA Global. Aaron is an early stage investor, entrepreneur, strategic advisor to both startups as a scale and corporates as a gain agility for innovation. I'm not going to say a lot about him because my first question for Aaron would be, can you tell us more about yourself? But hey, hi Aaron, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you guys?
I'm doing
I,
fine. Where are you right now?
I'm in Kenya. I'm in Nairobi.
Oh, nice. I'm in Lagos, Nigeria.
I was really hoping to include Lagos on my trip this time, but that's going to be later in the year, I hope.
But you've been here before,
There's like
right?
a new place called like Suya Fries, which I really want to go try. Yeah, of
You
course. I
definitely should
spent I
try
spent
that.
many months in Lagos.
Okay. All right. So we don't have so much time, so let's just go into it. If you're going to describe yourself in a
Sure.
sentence, how would you describe yourself?
Wow. Okay. I think it would be curious supporter of other people's dreams. I'd say
Interesting.
that.
And what is your background? So in what ways do you support people's dreams?
Mostly by cheering them on the sidelines and sort of like having deep conversations with them when they're going through tough challenges. But I think I've always enjoyed being a part of other people's stories.
Mhm.
And I've built a number of companies of my own, but I have always felt that I'm helping bring something to life together with other people. So it never felt like my own
Mm.
vision. Like it felt like a very joint and shared. So even though I started myself and right now getting to work in venture and getting to work with all these founders across the world and specifically in Africa, yeah, you definitely like get inspired by all their energy, all their belief in the
Mhm.
world, and it's really cool to like be a part of their lives.
Yeah, I can imagine totally. So you're currently the head of growth at Catalyst Fund. What does that mean? What are your
Mhm.
responsibilities? What's your day to day like?
Yeah, sure. So at Catalyst Fund, we support our company through a variety of means. The primary means is really our deep venture building support. So whether they need like a new dashboard made, or they need a B2B strategy built, or they need new financial models built, we do all of that. As head of
Mhm.
growth, I focus a little bit more on their B2B sales as well as their financial models, and basically the sort of stakeholders around them that they need to succeed, right? Whether they be partners
Mhm.
or suppliers or investors or other kinds of technologies, we try and build an ecosystem around our companies to enable them to succeed, because not everything is internal. Of banks and large startups and telcos across the continent to explore what they need in terms of startup partnerships, and simultaneously I get to shout to a lot of the local investors and global investors as to what the opportunity is to invest in inclusive tech as well as digital commerce, and a few other sectors that we are driving forward in Africa.
Okay, so I was saying that you've gone from financial services to co-founding your own company and then to VC. So what has this journey been like? Why did you move up this at different points to lead you up to what you're currently doing right now?
So I think a lot of the Africans and Nigerians who are tuning in will appreciate this. But as a young Asian boy growing up, you only have a number of careers that you can pursue,
Hmm.
whether that's sort of being a doctor, an engineer, and banking was certainly one of them. And so that's kind of how I got my start in financial services. I began my career in the Czech Republic with Societe Generale. I've always seen sort of financial services' potential to impact a wide variety of problems, whether they be individual problems or small business problems or corporate problems. And at some point wanted to see if I can be as good as building products outside the
Mm.
bank than inside the bank. 4 or 5 years into my banking career, I decided to build a ride sharing startup. So, very similar to Max.ng and things like that
Hmm.
in Singapore. And that was quite an experience, right? And that's when I realized like how hard B2C is. And that's when I realized like how challenging it is, like building a startup for real, as opposed to what you hear about in the papers and on TV, right? Like it is a
Yeah.
serious slog. filled with more failures and disappointing moments than like triumphs, for sure. And I remember, like, one of the hardest things of building that was fundraising, right? Like building up that courage to stand in front of an investor and say, like, $2 million, like, absolutely, this idea is totally worth that. Between that and building my own startup, then moving to Kenya, I was working for Standard Chartered still, but covering digital financial services for about 8 markets across Africa. I saw much more happening in financial services outside the bank than inside the bank, right? I mean, Kenya obviously being a fintech hub, you saw like much more innovative payment models, lending models, and all that happening outside. So I actually decided to that's when I decided to switch sides, and so that's when I joined Nest, which is a Hong Kong-based venture firm in African startups to help them scale to Asia. I've always been a very big fan of, Africa began with importing a lot of technology, and then it sort of started evolving into building technologies for itself. And then I think the next evolution of that, which we're already beginning to see, is exporting that technology to other locations, right? And so I definitely wanted to make a push to drive that. And so that was my first step into venture, and I've kind of been there ever since. I like to think of myself as an entrepreneur within venture, because there's lots of new models to try out and build. But yeah, I think, like, working together with founders over the last couple of years has been really fulfilling, and I wouldn't change that for the world.
Yeah, I mean, the way you talk about it, it sounds like you're having a lot of fun doing it.
What's the point of doing anything that isn't fun, right?
Totally. Okay, so my next question is, how do you perceive investments in Africa, generally speaking? And what are the defining trends that you see that are going to shape the future of this space?
Wow. Okay. That's a really, really, really broad question. I think, if we were to look purely at on the dollar side, like, what you see is both, year on year, you see investment in Africa, especially in venture, grow almost double, like, for the last 3 to 4 years. I think that's very exciting. I think what's also very exciting is you see the individual rounds themselves getting larger and larger. I remember when I first got to Kenya about 7-8 years ago now, if you were to raise more than $50,000 round, it's like a pretty big deal. It's like, that's big money, right? Like, and nowadays it's pretty commonplace to have, pre-seed rounds, which are $500,000, almost approaching $1 million as well, which becomes very commonplace. And I think we're always trying to push for better, but I think sometimes we forget how just a couple of years ago, some of these rounds were unheard of, right? So I think that's sort of one big investment trend. I think another really cool trend that we're seeing is that, a couple of years ago, when you built a piece of technology, you really had to build it with very little supporting infrastructure around you. And what I mean is, if, for example, you were building an e-commerce startup, you would have to build a payment startup and a logistics startup and like a warehousing startup at the same time, right? To support your e-commerce business. But like right now, with so many payment infrastructure startups already out there, logistics startups already out there, you're able to build something that's much more focused and potentially much more deeper, right? So I think like that has also brought to life a lot of very exciting new opportunities. Those are probably two of the biggest trends I've seen. And I think maybe the third, if I can insert one more final one.
Yes, please.
It would really just be around the willingness of, I guess, customers to adopt digital technologies and the trust that they have, right? Because of a lot of these early pioneers who have delivered very strong value, like very sort of like basic but fundamental value, like, transferring money, things like that, you get people who are more used to transacting digitally. And then therefore it's easier to convince them to adopt new, perhaps more complex technologies on top of that, right? When I'm talking about both individuals as well as small business, as well as large corporates. So I think those to me are some of the 3 biggest things that are top of mind right now.
Nice, very nice. And so you do a lot of investment in seed stage, and I'm curious why. And also, when you're evaluating like opportunities there in seed stage, what are the things that you look out for? So why do you focus on seed stage, and then how do you evaluate like the potential good opportunity?
like I said, why do anything that isn't fun, right? So first of all, like I would argue that seed stage is probably like the most fun stage to work on. It's sort of where the product has already launched. There's already a pretty congealed team about it, right? So you're focused on you're still experimenting, but it's still there's a level of base that you're building on top of. And I think the other reason that drives us towards seed stage is also this idea that it's still very much a value of death for a lot of people, right? I think it's very easy to raise, not very easy, but like it's easier to raise like your sort of pre-seed and angel round, because you're pretty much just getting people that invest on faith, on you and on your team. But I think by the time you get to seed stage, when you need much more significant capital, right? When you might be needing like $500,000 or a couple million to really build to the next stage, like that's sort of where I think a lot of people hit a wall, whereby they aren't able to raise that million or raise that 2 million. So with the Catalyst Fund, like we absolutely look for companies which are on the trajectory towards being able to raise like that $2 million round, but just need that little bit of a push to sort of like get over the hump, right? So, very often the story is, a founder has hit 8 out of 10 milestones that, a later stage investor needs to see to be able to invest in them, but are just missing the 2, right? But those 2 cost another $250,000 to hit, right? So Catalyst Fund's role is really to come in here and work with these startups on those 2 goals so that they can reach their next stage of investment. As much as the funding ecosystem has evolved in Africa over the last couple of years, I still think that it still represents a sort of tough environment in that sort of middle seed stage.
Yeah. So what kind of companies do you look out for personally when you're investing? Or how do you evaluate like the best startups to say, this is something that could be something and I want to invest in it?
To me, one very, very important factor really is going to be just the team and how they work together. I know this is like said a lot, but let me elaborate, right? So it's about making sure that the team is flexible and supportive, and making sure we spend a lot of time on why the team is building what they're building, right? Because the what can change, the how can change, but the why tends to pretty much like stay consistent through the whole time, right? So that's something that I feel we spend a lot of time assessing. I think also, obviously, we take a long, hard look at the customer bases that they're serving. So, how large is this potential base, and what is the purchasing power of this potential base, and how useful is your product really to this base, right? So before we get into how much people are willing to pay for your product, I think we spend a lot of time as to like, are you actually solving a problem, right? So even though we've invested in companies that might not yet have product market fit, like I think we do need to see that there is a directionally like a push towards it. And I think we do so by spending a lot of time with the customers as well as potential customers of the startups that we back to really hear from them. Are they really happy with this product? Is it really solving a need? Or is it just sort of like, are they doing it because it's free? Are they doing it because like there's some other reason they're using the product? And very often that gives you a very good sense as to how critical this solution is. As when a merchant says, this particular solution has increased my revenues for the month by 10% in the last 3 months, like that's a pretty critical component to that individual's life. So spending a lot of time with the customers of our startups also is a way in which we assess.
Amazing. So, I mean, people say a lot, fintech is gaining a lot of traction in Africa, especially in Nigeria, here where I am, right? It's taking the bulk of investment here. But so aside fintech, are there other industries that you're actually looking to see, what in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, it's going to be having as much attention and investment like fintech is currently having now? And what are those industries in your opinion?
Yeah, and I can't disagree with how fintech definitely is taking the crown for the most focus on sector. But I think in response to your question, I feel that a lot of what we're going to see is going to be stuff that is built with fintech in mind as well, right? So I think this idea of embedded fintech certainly is gaining traction. So thinking a little bit about, logistics with a significant fintech component, or thinking a little bit about healthcare with a significant fintech component. So at the Catalyst Fund, we've actually been supporting other sectors. So if we think about the Assistive Technology Fund that the UK government set up, which works on sort of assistive technology, like hearing aids and other tools. A lot of the innovation around is in financial services, in how people access it, how people purchase it, how people are able to afford it. We also have recently launched a new program in Ghana together with the MasterCard Foundation that's focused on digital commerce. And again, right, like there's much more to digital commerce than moving money around, obviously moving the goods, moving people, but payments and credit and trade finance is definitely a very key component of the digital commerce ecosystem. And so we're then able to sort of take our learnings and insight from fintech into digital commerce, right? So I think what we're going to see is, a lot of infrastructure that facilitates trade that sort of goes one level deeper beyond pure fintech in that sense. But I think fintech is here to stay. I think it'll just become more embedded into other solutions which offer a little bit more than just moving value.
That sounds really good. So my next question is it's a bit more personal. You started after you did your stint at World Bank, you moved to Nest and then you moved to Mess. And so I'm curious as to how your experiences in those, I think maybe like 6 years between Nest and Mess has shaped how you do investments now, especially now that you're a partner at Shepherd Ventures and you're leading growth at the Catalyst Fund. Just like what was your early days of venture capital like at Nest and Mess, and how has that impacted how you do it right now?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I've tried to reflect on that more over the years. As I shared earlier, like I still remain extremely optimistic about the ability for African technology to be exported to the rest of the world. I've just become a little bit more realistic around the situations where that can happen versus situations where that cannot happen, right? I think that's one. Two is, I think very early on, I read too many books which said, don't invest in a founder if you can't add value to them. And I think a lot of the deals that I wished I invested in that I had unfortunately passed on were founders that were working in sort of lower income areas or in agriculture, which at that point of time, 5-6 years ago, I had very little depth on. And so I decided to pass on those. But those were some of like the biggest companies that you see out there today, which I definitely regret. So I think my evolution of that thought has been, back a founder as long as you believe in them, and then figure out how you can add value to them later, because you'll be incentivized to do so and you can figure out how to do so, right? So I think saying no in situations where I couldn't add value was a mistake. And I think, finally, one of the evolutions is important to build long-term relationships. Whether or not you're working with a founder for the first time or the second time, it's important to just, remain positive and supportive and make sure that you're never sort of like, stepping on toes or offending on anyone, and really sort of like seeing everyone as sort of a very long-term engagement, right? Because someone who you are hiring as an intern into your venture firm was probably 4 years later going to start an amazingly successful company, and you want to be sure that you're still on good terms, that she'll invest in the company, right? So I think like being very long-term about the relationships that you have, I think has really sort of like struck home for me, for sure. You never know where people end up.
Nice. It's like you don't know if you'd be an investor in my future company, so I have to like, keep this relationship long-term.
Well, I mean, let's take it even to the next level, right? Like, I don't know if one day you'll be a partner at a fund that I'm raising money for my startup.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's,
Exactly. And that brings me to my next question. If you go back to being a founder, what industry do you think you're going to play in?
It depends on whether or not we are going back in time or we are sort of like doing today, but with hindsight. If it was doing today, but in hindsight, like I'd probably want to do a lot more in logistics, because I really think that that's a very, very broken and critical component that's inhibiting a lot of commerce on the continent, right? And I don't just mean like the 4 to 5 layers of middlemen in most industries. I don't just mean the broken sort of last mile delivery systems, even to get it from like the port to the warehouse, from the warehouse to the distributor. Like all of that is highly, highly broken. But also, like, I've realized that I really enjoy sort of like real world movement of goods and services. So like I really like that part. And so it's like a big enough problem, and it's a problem that allows me to be in the field. So I think I would love to do something like that. And it does feel like something where if we can get right in Africa, despite all the challenges that exist in the ecosystem, that's an exportable sort of like skill set and model, right? So yeah, logistics is probably going to be pretty high on that. I wish I was good at anything creative. Like if I could make a career from like writing or from, I don't know, like drawing, like sure, that'd be wonderful. But as much as I would enjoy it, I don't think anyone's going to pay me for it. So that's a challenge. If I were to go completely off course, then I'd probably say that one of my dreams, and this I can share. One of my dreams is to own a very small sort of dumpling bar, where I make really creative little pockets of fun juiciness like every day for people. And the reason I want it to be small is so that I can see the face of everybody as they take their first bite. I think that would be really important to me, because I think like right now, like so much of what I do, I don't get to see like final customer satisfaction. Right. So like getting to see the face of someone that's trying your product, obviously in my mind, I'm assuming they like it, but they might not. But even then, any feedback is
you
good
want
feedback.
To be able to see their reaction.
Interesting.
So does that mean that you're a foodie? Are you very interested in food?
Oh, absolutely. Like I think I experiment way too much in food. Like I have burnt a lot of pans. I've set off a lot of smoke alarms. Yeah. So if I ever get a chance to cook for the club, like be prepared for some wildness and forgive me.
Interesting. Awesome. So when you're not working, when you're not, chairing up businesses, when you're not being curious, when you're not setting up fire alarms or cooking alarms, what exactly will we find you doing? Like, what do you do for fun outside all of this?
I think my family would say that I start new businesses for fun. I don't think they think I do anything else besides doing that. I guess the more classic thing to say is that like I really enjoy like hosting parties. Like I think if one thing I missed from Nairobi was, every other weekend we would have hundreds and hundreds of people over at our home. We would host like large wine clubs, things like that. I really enjoy sort of bringing people together, especially around. But if I was sort of really angry and trying to blow off steam, like I would totally say that it'd just be like video games. So I'm on StarCraft a lot. I'm on Counter-Strike a lot. I'm a little bit like older, so like these are like
so a little bit like older.
But they're still good. I think StarCraft 2 is still an amazing game. I think Counter-Strike 2 is like in its prime. It's not visually stunning anymore, but I think they're great. I don't need the best graphics to believe.
Right. All right. So our time is over. I'll just ask you one final question. What is your most popular advice that you usually give to startup founders in Africa, especially first-time founders?
Especially first-time founders. Okay, then that's pretty easy. I would just say like just enjoy the ride. And learn as much as you can, because your first is not going to be your last. And your first is also where there's no one is expecting you to succeed, so you're going to surprise everyone on the upside. Your first is where you can take the most risks. So I would just say enjoy it, because you're going to look back on it as one of the most sort of life-defining experiences of your life. And I think a lot of people like rush through it. If I can go one step further, it's like keep a diary, like write every day about like what you're going through, your thoughts, be true about it. And like 5-6 years later, like read it, that's going to be a life-defining moment for you. So enjoy the journey.
Amazing. This has been awesome learning from you and chatting with you. Thank you so much for giving us the last 30 minutes of your time. And this is where we say goodbye.
Yeah.
All
Take
right.
care,
Hope to
peace.
talk to you
It's
again
been really great
sometime
sharing
soon.
this. Take care.
You too,
See you later.
Aaron. Do take care. All
Bye.
right, guys.